Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's presentation, Cruising with Steinbeck on the Sea of Cortez, is brought to you by NatHab Expedition Leader Sofia Merino. A little bit more about our presenter. Sophia studied marine biology at Autonomous University in Baja California Sur, where she completed her bachelor's thesis on blue whale acoustics. She leads natural history and whale watching expedition in Baja's La Paz Bay and San Ignacio Lagoon, while helping local fishing communities develop their ecotourism goals. Sophia combines her expertise in marine science with science communication, regularly giving educational talks about whales, ecotourism, and marine conservation to inspire the next generation of marine biologists. Thank you for being here today, Sophia. Over to you.
Thank you, Brooke, and welcome everybody to this presentation. Yes, I think that intro is perfect, and it's going to make a lot of sense also with the topic that I wanted to present today. So let's go ahead and start today. So cruising with Steinbeck on the Sea of Cortez, and I wanted to add three dots and again, because there was an expedition in 1940s, and we're going to go through a little bit about that, but also how still to this day, this is so much present here in the Sea of Cortez and for many other people. Maybe just to add a bit about myself there, the trip that I guide with NatHab, that I've been doing it for this season is going to be my 7th season actually, is the gray whales trip in Baja California. And yeah, this is just, if you want to come and join us, please do. But today's topic is going to be about this amazing book, which I have right here. That's the picture of the book I'm holding in my face right now, The Log from the Sea of Cortez. And I wanted to tell you all a little bit about how and why I decided to make this presentation. And I think this presentation is going to be probably a bit different. It has history, it has personal notes, some correlations between the book and my personal life and things that are happening now here in the Sea of Cortez, some stories about the ship. Like, it's going to be a little bit of everything. But when I was in marine biology school, and specifically, I think it was like 2012, that my professor, my ornithology professor, he actually recommended this book. And he said, if you don't know about it, you need to go and buy it right now, and you need to read it. And I've never heard about this book before. So I did, actually. I had a lot of respect for this professor. He was also a professor in literature, actually. So, and he said, if you can read it in English, it would be great, because that's the language that it was written by, even though we can also find it in Spanish. So I did, I went and I bought it, and I read it for the first time, when I was 19. And I have to be honest with all of you that at that moment, I couldn't figure it out, the book. I read it and I was like, this book is, I don't know what I was expecting, maybe, and probably it was going to be just this scientific book or this trip that these people did, sorry. And I couldn't, in my scientific brain, most likely, I couldn't put it in a box, which it was so wrong of me at that time. And I still liked it, and I found that it was quite fascinating. But I have to say, until I read it again and again, I truly, I think, understood a bit more of the book. So with that, we're going to dive in first in, of course, the authors of the book. And we're going to go and talk a bit about Ed Ricketts and John Steinbeck, of course. So John Steinbeck, I think now all of us know him, not only from The Log of the Sea of Cortez, but also the Pearl, that it's believed that he was inspired by being in La Paz, which is the city that I live. And then after he was here, he felt inspired into writing that specific book, which I think is quite interesting. But also Mice and Men, that I read it some years later, Grapes of Wrath. And he's this author that we are all so familiar with. But this particular book, it was one of his first ones, actually. And Ed Ricketts, he was such a character. And it's important to know the moment that these two met and how this expedition came to be. So they actually met in 1930, and this was in Pacific Grove in California. And they actually met at a friend's, Ed Ricketts. He had a friend that he hosted dinners, and it was like a bohemian type of way. People would come and eat and have great conversations, and they met in this particular place. At the time, they were 28 and 33 years old. They were quite young. And Ed Ricketts, he was running actually a commercial lab that was supplying, slides or biological specimens to schools and labs. Quite a unique type of job. John Steinbeck at the time, he had recently moved to that area, and with his first wife, and he wanted to write and essentially pass the Great Depression in that spot. He loved the ocean. He loved ecology, which was a brand new topic actually at that time. And these two developed a friendship over years, over time. And it was mostly because Steinbeck was so interested in what Ed Ricketts was doing at the time. So apart from this lab, he was also, he had so much knowledge of intertidal communities, of marine invertebrates, but he would see things not as a unique species, but as a whole, as they share this space with other communities of marine invertebrates, and it was these whole things that were happening at the time with ecology as a new subject, and that John was so interested in Ed particularly. What happens later is that because of the economy, the Steinbecks, they didn't really have a lot of income. So Ed actually hired John's wife to work in his lab. And through this and some, a lot of connection and conversations, a lot of respect and a unique friendship was born between these two characters. So the next picture here, it's going to show Ed Ricketts in his lab with his specimens. It would be all sorts of different animals that he would have, but with a heavy focus on marine invertebrates, okay? So Ed, he already wrote a book actually that was quite known, and it was specifically of the California coast and ecosystem, but he wanted to expand his knowledge. He wanted to expand just his region of knowledge, and he always thought about going to the Gulf of California or the Sea of Cortez. So he shared these ideas with Steinbeck, and at that moment they said, okay, let's go and do this trip. Let's think about doing a trip. So they did. And so from here, we're going to dive right into what the trip was and where it went. So essentially in 1940, they left Monterey Bay. And if you follow the blue line, they came all the way to Mexico, to the Baja California Peninsula, all of this land that you see here. And if we follow the blue line, they turn around here in Cabo. They came up to La Paz, where I live, if you're following the arrow there. And then they continue all the way to the Mid-Reef Islands, which are a beautiful set of islands in the uppers, getting close to the upper side of the Gulf. From there, they cross to an island called Island Tiburon or Island Shark in the side of mainland Mexico. They continue their way down, eventually cross back to La Paz, and then out and up north again to Monterey. So this was a 6-week voyage, and we're going to think about this voyage first in the sense of the scientific importance and the things that they wanted to do. So they had, some people say, between 20 to 30 collection sites where they actually stopped and went down and collected specimens. They actually collected thousands of them. Not only one individual of each that they could find, and it would be a new one or maybe one that they were not familiar with. They collected thousands of them. They kept them. And now we know that it was around close to 600 different species of marine invertebrates that they collected on this particular trip. The importance of this trip, apart amongst so many other things, is that At the time, it was the first compendium of marine invertebrates of the Gulf. There were some other expeditions before this, but they were focused in some other species. But this was so focused on marine invertebrates. And there's a quote by Ed Ricketts that it says, "It seems gratifying to reflect on the fact that we, unsupported and unaided, seem to have taken more species in greater number and better preserved than expeditions more pretentious and endowed." So this is a quote that Ed Ricketts had. But so we're going to think about, all the work that they did in this condensed time. And essentially what happened right after is that when they came back, they wrote a book. So this book that is authored by both John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts, the name is Sea of Cortez, a leisurely journal of travel and research. And this was the book that was published right after the trip in 1941. So just 1 year after their expedition, they published this. And this book was two different things. One was a narration of the trip itself, what they did, how they planned it, a lot of personal stories along the way, an amazing thing. And the other side of it, it's essentially a species of list that they collected, things they found, a more scientific log of what they did. So this is the original and the first book that came out of that 6-week expedition. And again, it was written and shared to the world in 1941. So something that is quite important to know is that the goal of both of them was not only to see how many species you can find or how many new species you can find. It was really to get an overall sense of the fauna, the ecological relationships that they have with other regions, and view as a whole interconnected ecosystem, I would say, of the Sea of Cortez, much as Rickett had already done in the US Pacific coast with his previous book. And what they attained with this book is that they introduced the field of marine ecology to the general public. And there's a great researcher, actually, of the name Aaron Hirsch. He's a writer and a biologist of the University of Colorado Boulder, which they have an institute in the Sea of Cortez too. And he says, Sea of Cortez, talking about the book, this first book, is a weird and intriguing amalgam of literature, philosophy, and science. And I think that's why, for me at least, when I first read that book, I couldn't, again, as I told you before, I couldn't put it in a box because this book is not meant to be put in a box. It is a book about science. It is a book about literature, philosophy, and about the relations of human with nature. And I think that's why I was so surprised and first confused by the book and then surprised. So that's why I love this phrase by Aaron Hirsch, because he's so true in the way of how that book, the meaning of this particular book. So what happens after is that the book that we all know, that we're more familiar with, which is, this book right here, is that sadly in 1948, Ed Ricketts was killed. His car was hit by a train as he was leaving his lab. Steinbeck was actually in New York when this happened, and he couldn't arrive on time to say goodbye of his dear, dear friend. And this was a huge loss in the whole community of Pacific Grove and Monterey Bay area, because a lot of people have so much deep respect for Ed Ricketts and the job that he did there, not only in that area, but he had connection with so many other researchers that were working with marine invertebrates at the time in other parts of the US. So he died in 1948, and a year later, in 1949, Viking Press, which is now Penguin Books, they secure Steinbeck's permission to reissue the narrative half of the book. Remember that I told you that the first book, Sea of Cortez, was 2 in 1. So the narrative half, they republished in 1951 as the log of the Sea of Cortez. And that's why it says there that it's written by John Steinbeck. But they added at the end of the book, actually, there's a whole chapter that talks about Ed Ricketts, because Steinbeck wanted to honor him, of course, in that way. So yeah, this is just something important to know, like this book that we all know, it's essentially was reissued after Ed Ricketts sadly passed away. So I this book was so important, and it is still so important, because it was such a significant early call also for environmental conservation. They noted a lot of what was happening with deep sea trawling, for example, in the shrimp business. It was also a scientific document detailing new species, ecological relationships, and it was a work that truly inspired many generations of marine, now known as marine biologists, but not only marine biologists, also artists, poets, writers. And I've read so many, as I was doing the research for this presentation, I was reading so many stories from researchers that I know now that they were inspired by this book to study what they studied. And to me, it was quite interesting. I've never heard about this book, maybe because I think in Mexican literature it's not really known. It's more known in American literature. But I can understand now the big impact that this book had and continues to have to this day, which is something that I want to share with all of you. So I this copy, as I was telling you, I got it most likely in 2012, and I highlighted some things at that time. And as I was doing my research for this presentation, I found, as words of them resonated with me that I highlighted on the book, they also resonated with so many people, because I could find these words being quoted again and again by writers and by marine biologists. So one of it is this first phrase. I'm going to explain a bit the context that I would like to share with you. That this is when they are leaving. They prepared this expedition. They chartered the Western Flyer, which is the ship, and all of their friends and family are ready to say goodbye of them. And this phrase is that moment. They are there, about to leave the dock, and everybody's saying their goodbyes to them. So it says, "We said goodbye again and again, and still could not bring ourselves to cast off the lines and start the engines. It would be good to live in a perpetual state of leave-taking, never to go nor to stay, but to remain suspended in that golden emotion of love and longing, to be missed without being gone, to be loved without satiety." And again, to me, when I think about this scientific book, and again, I'm reading about this as a 19-year-old, I'm like, what? And this is at the beginning of the book. I'm like, what is this book about? But I love the words there. Now I'm going to pass to another one, because this is more about the job of biologists, of marine biologists, of people of science. And it says, the biologist, that is in the previous page, deals with life, with teeming, boisterous life, and learns something from it, learns that the first rule of life is living. And I think this is so true. And us as passionate travelers, passionate researchers, the first rule of everything is understanding life and how we are living it now. And I think this quote is such a strong and unique quote from Steinbeck there in the book. I hope you're liking the ones that I'm sharing with all of you. Another phrase that I would like to share with you from the book, it is more about that philosophical questions that they portray and the connections between the little things with the big things. And it says, "All things are one thing, and that one thing is all things: plankton, a shimmering phosphorescence on the sea, and the spinning planets, and an expanding universe, all bound together by the elastic string of time. It is advisable to look from the tide pool to the stars, and then back to the tide pool again." So again, this book is so much more than we can first think about. And if you haven't read it, I invite you to read it. And if you have, hopefully this presentation is already resonating with you right now. So I wanted to show a picture of the members of the expedition because it wasn't only Ed and John. Also, Steinbeck's first wife, Carol, was there. They have a captain, they had a seaman, they have an engineer and a cook, and everybody that was in the expedition is portrayed in that book there. Sorry, in that picture right there. So apart from the team of people that they needed, of course, they needed a ship. So I'm going to focus a lot on the Western Flyer because the ship literally brought them from Monterey to Baja California. And to this day, the ship is still taking places, it's still going places, it's still taking people. And maybe this is news for you, but the ship still exists. So we're going to go and see a little bit about the history of the Western Flyer and to get to the point of what it's doing now, okay? So this picture that you can see there is from the 1950s, but the Western Flyer is actually was built in 1937 as a seiner. It was built in Tacoma, Washington, and the purpose of it was to take it to the sardine fleet in California. And then in the 40s, so it was a brand new ship almost, it was chartered by them to go on their marine collecting expedition, okay? So that's the origin of the Western Flyer. And then we're going to go to essentially to see what happened after. So the picture that you have there is from the 1940s. And in the 40s, it's by the end of the 40s actually, is when the sardine fishery collapsed in Monterey. And they used the ship until the fisheries collapsed. So it was there in the 40s towards the end of the 40s. Then it was taken to Ketchikan, Alaska, and then back to Seattle. And essentially in the 50s, we don't really have pictures of the ship in the 50s. It turned into a trawler for black and Pacific cod. From there, we skip until the 1960s, and you can see in this picture from 1964, it has some crab pots in the back. So the Western Flyer went all the way to the Aleutian Islands to fish for crab, and in that area is where they changed their name to Gemini. And from the 60s, we go now to the 70s, and you can see now here the name Gemini on the side. And it worked in Southeast Alaska as a salmon tender for around 10 years there. It was nearly grounded and lost in a reef in Southeast Alaska. And after that happened, there's a note that says that around 1974, it got sold for $10. We don't know much about what happened after. The story of the ship gets a bit murky, but when we learn from the Western Flyer, if we skip all the time until the 90s, is when we really get to learn again from it. The owner reports that it's in a really, really bad condition, that it had spent some time in Anacortes in Washington. And some of the information we know is that one of the nephews of the first owners was actually looking for the boat. And he's the one that located, and it was in Anacortes. And it was by the number, the unique number that each boat has, that they were able to find it because they couldn't recognize the boat. He wanted to buy it, but he was rejected to it in the last minute. So after what happens is that, so the ship essentially went all the way to Alaska, Oregon, Washington, California, and of course, Mexico in 1940s on the expedition. So later on, what happens with the Western Flyer is that we know that someone wanted to buy it to put it in a hotel as a cafe. So to, chop it in pieces and the things that they needed so they could, make this beautiful cafe at a hotel. But then that didn't happen. It was moored in a dock. It was moored at some point, and then it was brought to a dock and then back. So there's all this story about coming and going. And it was sunk twice when it was in Washington. This is a note, actually, of there says, historic boat hits bottom again. And this was in 2013. And here we can just see the top part of the Western Flyer sunken down, and that it was brought up. So later on in 2012, John Gregg, he's a marine geologist. He was looking for it, and he was one of those people that was so inspired by the book. When he was 10 years old, he read it, and that's one of the reasons why he studied marine geology, actually. So for a long time, he was looking for the Western Flyer, and in 2012, he found it, and he was able to buy it in 2015. So when he bought it, it looked like this picture that you can see, quite different from the first pictures that I show you of how it was. So from 2015 to 2024, a group of around 100 people worked on the Western Flyer to restore this ship. And this is how it looks today. It was fully renovated by Port Townsend Shipyards, and I saw there's a lot of videos and notes and stories about the people that work on it, and for them it was an honor, because this ship is so known, especially if you're in boating, if you're in sailing, if you're in this type of hobbies or industries. A lot of people know the Western Flyer, so they said it was truly an honor to work on it and to renovate it. So it took a lot of time, but now it's back on its feet and it's in the water. So we say now that this is how the Western Flyer looks now. This is a true picture of the Western Flyer on the water. And now it is continuing to inspire the next generations of scientists, artists, and explorers, because John Gregg, he established the Western Flyer Foundation. So what they do is they are bringing back education and research in this vessel. They are doing community engagement. They go to different ports and invite schools. So they learn about the expedition that the Western Flyer did in the Sea of Cortez, but not only that, also of education in general and research and science in general. And they also, of course, doing the stewardship, because they continue to take care of this boat that it is not just a boat, right? It's part of history, truly. So something that I wanted to bring along is how this ties a bit to me. And I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people, because the book has ties with so many people. And this year, in 2025, I was in my phone looking at social media stuff, and I saw this post. In Spanish, it says, El regreso del Western Flyer, the return of the Western Flyer, from 1940 to 2025. And when I saw this, it was a professor of mine that shared this. I remember I was like, what? Because I had no idea that the ship was still standing. I mean, I just didn't know. I just, someone that has read the book and has been inspired by the book, but that's it. So I was like, wait, what's happening? So I clicked on the thing and I go and I learn about the foundation, and I learn about that the Western Flyer is on a trip of 100-day trip in the Sea of Cortez, and that it was going to come to my city. So I am freaking out. I'm telling my mom, I'm telling my friends, because I'm like, this ship is coming. Some, they didn't know about it. The ones that are related to marine stuff, they did. And I was like, we have to go. So here we go. And this is the Port of La Paz, this picture that you see on the left. And it was a whole event, a huge event, because it was coming back 85 years after that expedition that they did. So essentially, it was this whole event. A lot of people was there, and they would take smaller groups of people into the ship, and they invited local students. Before they arrived, they invited local students to learn about the ship, to learn about the expeditions, and then they would be our guides in Spanish, and they would be teaching us about the ship. And I think it was such a great job of integrating the local community and the local students into it. So here we go on deck and we see it. Here I am at the captain's quarters, standing, very, very happy to be there. But something that happened that really struck me and gave me the chills is when I first stepped on deck. This is a picture I took. I saw this turtle there, and I'm like, I just started laughing, and I'm like, no way, this is where the story about the turtle happened. And my mom is looking at me like, what do you mean? So I'm like, okay, I'll tell you this story a bit later. And that's the story that I want to tell you, and that is going to combine the expedition, the ship, the present, and also things that happened in the past. So remember about the turtle, okay? So when in 2016, one of my first jobs out of college was working in a sea turtle project in Magdalena Bay. Magdalena Bay is here. It's in the Pacific coast of the Baja Peninsula. It's a beautiful bay. And we were working offshore, couples of miles offshore. We would have also a field station onshore, and we would go weather alone every single day outside to study the sea turtles. This was a project that it was led by marine veterinarians, and I was, a fresh out of college marine biologist, and it was like my first job essentially. So here's a picture of me. We would take samples, we would collect blood, we would collect barnacles, we would tag them, we would measure stomach contents, we would study a lot of different things from them. And then we would release them back in the water. So when that happened in 2016, I was reading for the second time this book while I was in Magdalena Bay in that location. Okay? And something that happened while I was reading that book, it was another moment like the one I had when I stepped on deck and I saw the turtle on the deck. Something similar happened, because I'm going to read to you some just a couple of words from page 38 from this book, and you can find some of them there. But essentially, in one of the chapters, Ricketts and Steinbeck, they are in Magdalena Bay too, the same place that I was working with sea turtles. And they say, here it says, by 2 p.m., we were in the region of Magdalena Bay. The sea was still oily and smooth, right? And a lazy fog lay on the water. These are some videos that I took while I was working in Magdalena Bay in 2016. And I remember when I read this book in that location, it gave me the chills too, because those are the same conditions, right? Flat calm, still oily and smooth. And every day we would depart the town to go out and work on the sea turtles. There was this fog constantly, okay? So I'm like, I'm reading about this, in the same place that they were. So let me go to the next one here. That's just a picture of me out there in Magdalena Bay, surrounded by fog that we had to stop. We couldn't go anywhere because we were just, surrounded by it. And it's one of my very best memories of that place. But I want you to, as I'm reading this other, from the same chapter, these other phrases, have in mind that here we have Tiny, one of the crew members, and there's a sea turtle on deck on the ship, okay? And it says, Tiny, that crew member, is a natural harpooner. Often he had stood poised on the bow, holding the lance, but thus far nothing had appeared except porpoises, and these he would not strike. But now the sea turtles began to appear in numbers. Essentially, later says, I'm not going to read everything, but he strikes the turtle. He cannot kill the turtle. He grabs an axe and things happen, okay? Another part he says, suddenly remorse seized Tiny. This turtle was as lively as it had been, and a large quantity of very rare blood poured from the trunk of the neck. We were eager to examine this turtle, and we put Tiny's emotion aside for the moment. So what happened is that Ricketts starts to analyze this turtle, because he has a scientific brain. And these are pictures of me when I was there, that we were doing exactly the same thing. And he says, we were eager to examine in this turtle. There were 2 barnacle bases on the shell and many hydroids, which we preserved immediately. Here you can see so many barnacles, this turtle from Magdalena Bay. And then later on, in the hollow beside the small tail were 2 pelagic crabs of the square-fronted group, a male and a female, and from the way in which they hid themselves in the fold of the turtle skin, they seem to be at home there. Here you can see this crab peeking from a turtle. This is a picture I took from the internet. But again, I'm reading this book in Magdalena Bay about these things, and I am working with turtles at that time. So that was one of my great moments of wow, you know, they did it in 1940s, and I was doing it in 2016. So fast forward to this year, 2025, I step on the deck, and this thing that they added here, this turtle, is to mark the place where they put that turtle, that tiny kill that they wanted to eat, but at the end they didn't eat because they quote later on, they say, Tiny swore that he would give up sea turtles and he never again tried to harpoon one. In his mind, they joined the purposes as protected animals. The cooking was a failure. They wanted to keep the turtle shell, and at the end, in the book, it says that they didn't keep the shell of that actual turtle, but I found in some other information that most likely they did kept it actually. So just to bring it to the now, I go to the ship here in La Paz at my home port, and I step on it and I see this and I'm like, what is happening? So like all of my different worlds of different times kind of collided in one moment. And yeah, I just wanted to share that story because it was quite a, I don't know, a remarkable moment for me. And I want to share with you these videos here. This is of the event, and this is the type of event that the foundation is doing in the US and also in Mexico. To all the different towns that they went, they stopped, they invited the community, they were organized groups, and they are teaching about marine science. And it has been such an important, truly such an important thing, because the log of the Sea of Cortez, it's still present, and the Western Flyer is still here, and the work and the idea of having it fully renovated and then that it continues to inspire people, I think is such a beautiful idea that John Gregg had, and he's doing it. You know, he is truly doing it. So these are just some images of that event, and yeah, that I wanted to share with all of you. So from here, we are kind of getting towards the end of this presentation. And a part of the expedition, the expedition itself, it inspires so many people that species from the Gulf, of course, they have the name of either Ed Ricketts or John Steinbeck, like this anemone, like this sea slug, like this clam. Their Latin names, they either end in Rickettsii or Steinbecki, and it is in honor of them and the incredible work that they did at the time that is still being recognized and is still being honored by current researchers. So another thing that is important is that there's this quite known researcher by the name of Richard Brusca. He's the top researcher of marine invertebrates, and every marine biology student have read the books about him. And he wrote a scientific paper that was published in the Journal of the Southwest from Arizona University. And this journal in particular studies the American Southwest, northern Mexico, and also the US-Mexico border area. So that's why it was published there. And that specific paper, you can see how they are honoring the expedition in the front cover, actually, of that year. And the paper is the 1940s Ricketts Steinbeck Sea of Cortez expedition with annotated lists of species and collection sites. And essentially what he did, and he wrote this in 2020, celebrating 80 years of the expedition. He took the notes from Ricketts, from Steinbeck, the actual original book of Sea of Cortez, and he takes this scientific information and brings it to now and compares some things with the past and the present to understand how things have changed. He also corrects some names because, of course, they have changed through the years. Ricketts made some mistakes of identification, so Brusca, adds to this. Yes, it's essentially as you are reading the original book with the scientific notes, but Brusca is just bringing it to how we could explain it now and today. And it was a very huge work that he did, and quite an important one. So again, just another way of showing how the importance of this expedition and how we still think about it in science. Okay. And another thing to put it into perspective is that the Western Flyer, to the different places that it's going, it's connecting with the local communities that it connected in 1940. So there is one chapter in the book, chapter 16, that it is a fantastic chapter that talks about how Ricketts and Steinbeck were invited by Leopoldo Perpulis, his name, a local ranchero, a local owner of the land there, and they invite them to ride mules and to hunt. And actually, they did not hunt anything, but it's a beautiful written chapter, one of my favorites, actually, of the book, chapter 16. And so when the Western Flyer Foundation is doing outreach to these different communities, there's this woman that lives in Loreto, and she says, wait, the family of Leopoldo Perpulis is still here, and it would be great if we can bring them to the Western Flyer, because his father met Ed and John. So they managed to do that. So the picture, the people that you see standing here on the left, is actually the daughters, sons, and granddaughters of Leopoldo Perpuli, the guy that took Ed Ricketts and Steinbeck to the mountains. And here they are sitting inside of the Western Flyer. But one of the most important things that they brought is this picture. There aren't almost any pictures of Ed Ricketts and Steinbeck together. There's two that we know, only two. So the family brought this picture where we can see Leopoldo's brother, that is right here. This is Leopoldo, so the father of all the people we saw in the picture. And then we can see Steinbeck and Ricketts together in this picture that was taken in 1940. And you can read the cruise log of the actual crew now in 2025 when this happened. And this is something that they couldn't believe this. Because even though Steinbeck and Ricketts brought with them film cameras, they didn't take much, they didn't take many, and also not a lot of them survived even to be kept in the right way of the species, because they wanted to document the species of the animals. And yet this family took this picture and they brought it to the ship and they shared it with the crew. And I think it's something that that is very important to highlight. So the last thing that I want to mention here is that you can go to the Western Flyer Foundation, and it's westernflyerfoundation.org, I believe. And you can go to the section that says, where's the flyer? And you can see where it's at now. So right now it's at Monterey Bay in Moss Landing. And they are waiting to we are waiting to essentially to learn about the fall program. And yeah, if you happen to live nearby, you can go and visit, and you can see the type of events that they're doing, and you can stay connected to the stories of the Western Flyer and that important expedition, which is what they continue to do. So yes, this is how I wanted to finish. This book inspired me, inspired many people, and right now the Western Flyer, it's inspiring young communities, young kids from essentially Mexico and the US, into hopefully at some point becoming scientists or authors or artists or something related to that. So I hope that you like the presentation, and yeah, with this I get towards the end. Um, Maybe there's some comments or questions, but I hope that also you understood why I wrote again, Cruising with Steinbeck on the Sea of Cortez again. So one more time. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm here if there is anything. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Sophia. Oh my gosh, that was so interesting. All of my research and background has been on the land, so this was all new for me, and maybe other people feel the same who might not have a marine biology background like you do. So that was fantastic. All right, everyone, we have some time for Q&A. If you have a question, please go ahead and drop them there in the control panel. Lots of thank yous coming in, by the way, right now, Sophia. Everyone is they enjoyed it just as much as I did.
Awesome.
But yeah, go ahead and drop those in, and we will get through any questions that come in until the top of the hour. So right now we only have one question so far, and it's actually about your sea turtle work. Could you talk more about the stomach contents? How did you get those samples, and what was the goal behind those samples?
Yes, totally. It was so in that project, the thing that happened, there was something that we call the massive stranding, sadly, of sea turtles off the coast. So the group of researchers wanted to know why, and they wanted to know how can we prevent it, right? So in order to answer those questions, we have to go out and study the population. So that's why we would go and collect all sorts of different samples, and the vets, they would analyze it. So for the stomach content in particular, essentially you open the mouth of the turtle, which is not an easy job. There's a specific type of instrument that can help you with that. You open it, you hold it open, and then you have to insert a tube that goes in, and then you have to put salt water, and essentially you're going to make the turtle vomit. And as soon as you see it coming out, you have a Ziploc bag waiting, and you place the head down, and then all that stomach content comes out of the turtle into that Ziploc bag. And from this, we would learn what are the things that they are eating, right? That particular population, it's very offshore. It's not an easy population to study because they're in the open ocean and very deep waters. So the only time that we can see them is when they are coming to the surface to breathe. So that is when we would catch them, bring it on the boat, the little skiff boat, and then do this, taking the samples. And then our job was to send all of the samples back to the university, back to the lab, where other students would then analyze what type of algae they are eating, what type of hydroids they're eating, what type of gelatinous creatures, in a more simple way, they are eating, and to see if could it be that the things that they were eating were affecting them, and that's why we had those strandings. So this was only one part of it. Another one was taking blood samples of them too, and we would send it to a specialized lab that would analyze the blood to see if there were any type of heavy metals, for example, or any other type of things, pollutants, contamination. So yeah, that was a little bit about that specific project that we did, which actually we found that it was not a human interactions. It was sudden changes of temperature that essentially give them a shock. because they cannot thermoregulate their own temperature. If the temperature drops down in the ocean, they cannot cope with that, and they literally have a shock and they die. So that's something that happened, but that was a bit more of hopefully a full answer for that.
Oh, that was great. I was going to be my next question. It's like, so what did you find out? What was the answers?
Yeah, totally.
That was good. That was
Totally.
good. Oh, I love this comment. We have some people who just commented that they're avid sailors from Hawaii and that the Sea of Cortez is their favorite sailing area of all. So I had to read that to you because that is wonderful.
Excellent. It's an
Oh,
amazing place. Yeah.
this is a great question that just came in too. Could you talk about the layout of the ship and the interior? How was the space used? And maybe how number of rooms? Um, what was life aboard the Western Flyer?
Yes. Honestly, I don't remember the exact length of the ship, but it had a fully functional kitchen that we were able to see. They were able actually to get the same type of models of stoves that they have to when they were, rebuilding the ship again. Um, so now the ship inside looks a bit different because, and that's something that I forgot to mention, where the ship holds the fish, because it was built for fishing, they have a fully functional lab now. And they have gear and equipment, all sorts of different things there. But for now, it's a crew actually of 6 that can live in that place. And essentially, as in any kind of smaller type of boat, you have bunk beds that you are sharing bathrooms. In the book, it describes how it could be smelly and tight, of course, different things like that. But the outer deck, it is quite spacious. In the picture where you saw the craft pots, actually, the outer decks, when the Steinbeck expedition is where they did a lot of their job and their work, and a lot of their hanging out. It was there. But honestly, it is not a very big ship if you think about the expedition that they did, and how tight the spaces were. And also they had so many containers. Imagine about that, all the containers that they need in order to place around 10,000 samples. So of course they use that fish haul in order to do it. But still, in the book says that they would stumble upon, a container that had an anemone, or that it had a crab, or things like that, because it would be all over the place. And sadly, there are no pictures of how it was when inside of when they did the expedition. But um, I can tell you that now when I went in, I was like, these are some tight spaces for sure. If you think about 6 people living there 24/7. But they have made it such a lovely boat now that for the crew, I know that it's like a full honor to be working in a ship like this. So yeah, that's just a bit of the ship.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for that explanation. Oh, we just had an interesting question come in too. Speaking of your marine biology background, I've seen this too when I was in the Sea of Cortez. Why do all of the rays jump out of the water? What are they doing?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. And the great answer is that we don't fully understand it yet. Of course, there's theories about it. One of it is that it may be with courting. So when we see a group of rays that are courting, we see a lot of splashing. And this is in mating season. We see some splashing. Maybe it's a display of being, I'm big, I'm good, I'm fit. You can hear this big loud splash, maybe. Another one also that I've read is which is quite similar to actually to some theories of other animals that jump, is that they could be that they have some parasites or some things on their skin that they need to release that itch. For example, that big splash and that kind of slam on the water, it releases some of that. Another one is that when there's a large school of rays, particularly moving together, we can see the edge of that school of rays, that those are the ones that are jumping. okay? Not the ones in the middle, just the ones that are on the edge. So maybe this is a strategy as a unit, right? As a school of fish saying, we are big, we are huge, we're making these loud sounds, and don't come and don't attack us, because they are trying to prove that they are bigger than they are, right? Essentially working as a colony. So that is one that I think I like more of that theory. I think it makes a lot of sense if you think about them as they are, moving. And if you're in the water, if you're an animal that wants to prey on them, and you're in the water, you see this massive thing that is passing by, and you hear all these big, big splashes that are happening. Then you might think, oh, this is something bigger than me, and I don't want to go and attack it. You know. So those are some of the theories that I've read about them.
How fascinating. Oh my gosh. Sophia, I've learned so much today. I'm sure that everybody tuned in has as well. This has been fantastic. Well, those are the end of the questions that we have received. So, Sophia, I would love to turn it to you for any last closing comments.
Well, just thank you for your attention. This was like a different type of webinar, so thank you for attending. And hopefully at the end of this, if you haven't read the book, I inspire you to read it. And again, as I mentioned before, if you have read the book before, then I'm sure we reconnected by these stories of this amazing, amazing book. So yeah, just thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for tuning in today.
Yes, and thank you, Sophia, for giving us a great Friday. And I would like to thank everyone who tuned in. If you're interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, give us a call at 800-543-8917 or send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are more than happy to help you. Join us Monday for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and the replay will be available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody.